People will hear promises that, oh, we're going to give you electricity and we'll go and drop a transformer there. It's a problem for the sector. Such actions. You can do social interventions through providing people with healthcare, subsidized healthcare services, access to education, but not electricity, because electricity in itself is not the end goal. It's a prime mover. So for me, grants is not the problem. It's the effective stewardship of the capital you receive to deploy this project. I feel it's a no-brainer to get on this wave, because it does for you as an energy provider. One,
good evening and good day. Welcome to another episode of Connecting the Dots. Today, we have David Arinze, who is the lead on Renewable Energy Thematic Group for the NESG. David, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Emeka. It's a pleasure to be here. And I would like to say that it's a pleasure to be back home.
It's always good to have you, David. You've done a lot of work in the renewable energy space, actually in the whole sector, but more in the renewable energy space. And when I think about the transition the sector has gone through from no renewable energy projects to where we are now, a number of those enablers have been developers getting grant funding to do projects that might not be financially viable, but I use as pilot projects to prove the model. Is that model sustainable, or are we going to get to a point where developers don't have enough grant funding and the projects are not viable anymore?
Thank you so much for that question.
That question.
It's very, very a question that has several answers, and I'll try my best to share a few thoughts around it. So, why do we even have developers in the first place, and why renewable energy? We're trying to bridge an energy access gap, right? And I don't want to bore you with the numbers of how we have almost it's over 45 to 50% of Nigerians without access to electricity. And you look at what are the sources that were meeting the needs before renewable energy became a bit more mainstreamed in Nigeria. We had gas to power, we had hydro to power, and we had some other sources that you would leverage. But you ask yourself, how long does it take to construct these plants? So renewable energy came more like as a silver bullet to help ensure that we can rapidly get electricity access to people within record time.
Can you build an economy of renewable energy?
Absolutely. Now we think about it based on, okay, grants came. Yes. Why did grants even get a place in the first place? Why did we hear that there were grants for oil and gas refineries? This market in itself proved its bankability, and people were able to say, hey, I'm investing in this. Even up to very recently, we still have a plant which is seen as the largest plant, receiving an investment of over $20 billion. So that tells you that, hey, that particular solution, and a lot of people already believed in its bankability and its profitability, hence the investment. Unlike renewable energy, which has a lot of proving to do. And you know that you are deploying modular solutions in areas where our grid has not got into, and even in areas where the grid has got into, you still need some sort of complementarity in order to ensure that you keep the lights on. Now, why grants? Grants are seen as an instrument that literally could help serve as a springboard to finance projects that can prove to financiers that, hey, there is gold here, but you need to be willing and patient to get this gold.
But so I guess my question around grants are, they're not really grants, right? If you think about it from a sovereign point of view for the federal government,
yes,
$750 million that NEP was is not 150
or
naira.
that theirs is.
And theirs is. So that's $1.5 billion that we borrowed from the World Bank to do this work.
We're giving subsidy.
We're giving subsidy. So someone has to pay this money back. And it's us, right? So are these grants actually viable? Why? So I guess the point I'm making is 750 is a lot. If we've proved the model in the 5 years, I would have expected the next grant cycle would have been lower than 750. But from all indications, we're going to be higher than the 750.
One of the things that is important when we think about renewable energy, and which I like to always talk about, is the business case around it. We can choose now. If you think about it, $750 million after $500 million, and this is not to mention the other programs that are also providing grants. We can choose to be consumers, and that's what it's going to be. For all of those projects, how many of the equipment that those monies finance came out of our local markets? We all imported them. And so if you even look at the global spendings on renewable, sub-Saharan Africa in its entirety is even less than 3%. And so global spending went 70% was between US and China. Now you ask yourself, it's a solution. We can choose to be people who other countries produce to sell in, or we can choose to create value out of this. Several reports about critical energy minerals that show that Africa is where a lot of this mining is happening. You need lithium for lithium batteries. You need cobalt, you need copper, and a couple of all of these other equipments to produce some of these semiconductors and the rest of them. They're being sourced in Africa, but yet they take out the raw materials and bring back the equipment that you have to buy 3 times, 4 times, or even sometimes 5 times.
But that's the conversation that we're having. It's the oil conversation. We export raw and import the refined. It doesn't make sense. We have the conversation we've been having as far back as 10 years ago with Christine Kay and Donald at HBS, that Nigeria is going to gain from the renewable energy boom just from a consumption point of view, not from the entire value chain.
Which, in my own opinion, is not good enough.
It's terrible. Well, it's terrible.
Maybe I'm keeping it modest. So that's why when I think about these numbers, and when we think about, on one side, grants, why is grants useful? Yes, you're able to prove concepts, because I've financed businesses that have been able to go on to close commercial capital to finance much more pipelines, right? And so I have seen companies go from receiving just an injection that is less than $100,000 to becoming companies that are closing multi-million-dollar investments in their businesses, and they started with grants. So for me, grants is not the problem. It's the effective stewardship of the capital you receive to deploy these projects. Now, when we begin to go a bit further into these projects, we ask ourselves, how much do these projects actually cost? What is the quality that was done in that was adhered to in ensuring that these projects were deployed up to standard? Were there financial models that were even done before some of these projects were deployed, or it was just look for a committee and deploy? You can't do that.
No, you can't.
You must be able to ensure that before you even start any project, you must be able to guarantee financial viability and bankability. So even with grants, you design your model. Some of the projects that even I have been part of, some of them you have grant capital as part of it. You get some other sort of conventional financing into those projects. And again, if it doesn't, for every project I'm privileged to finance, if it doesn't check the commercial viability box, there's no point funding it in the first place.
Yeah.
Because every project proves that this sector This business is bankable. And hence, if you want to play into it, go to people like these companies, like that company, that one, that have been able to go beyond just building one, two, three mini grids to building tens and even hundreds of mini grids. So, and so when we think about grants, it's not the instrument in itself. It is the level of stewardship. I'd like to say you can check some of the companies that we have even playing in the sector. How many of them even have actual audited financials? Many of them really even understand the connection between tarification in some of these communities on the project and the profitability of the project. How many of them even know when they will close? They will get to returns on their investment at one point. So all of these things are critical elements when we talk about the project. And again, I would say that grants is relevant and is important because even within projects that were financed, we saw situations where $1 is unlocking $3, $4 in commercial financing, and yet it's going into those projects. So there are projects that, while the grants came in, it came into now. What's the usefulness of the grant? One, it's helping the commercial lender understand that there's a risk management mechanism with the grant. That's one. Two, it helps even the developer say, hey, if I was going to charge at this because of if I was going to use commercial capital entirely on this project, because of this grant, it reduces the burden on the consumer. And I'm willing to do. And of course, as a project administrator and a program manager, you ensure that they are not going against those things because, of course, there are agreements, exclusivity agreements, and power purchase agreements that are signed to with certain tariffs in place. So all of these things are very important. So even as anyone who is a financier, you're thinking about projects and all of that, you must be able to see that one, bankability, check. If there's some sort of grant capital, why not? Let's do it. But you must be able to see that in the entirety of things, you must be an effective steward of the financing. I tell you that there are projects that have done this until today. They're closing commercial capital to finance their pipelines.
Definitely. But so one of the benefits we've gotten as a firm is that we've had the opportunity to be an independent verification agent for
an IVA
for a few of these projects. And you see
I'm almost tempted to ask you, like, what's your experience on the ground? Is it what you see published out there? Is it different from the actual realities? It'd be great to hear your thoughts.
So in my mind, it's a very slippery slope because you have 90 million Nigerians without access to power. You can't, the due diligence to get companies on is very rigorous. But I think once things start going, a number of things could slip through the cracks. Just a brief experience that we've had is we have communities where so there are three levels, online, phone, and then
Physical
depending on the availability. So you now have very large availability, and they say go out to the field and verify. You go verify, and you say Emeka's house is here. He got a solar pump 6 months ago. Knock on the door. Emeka, oh yeah, I'm Emeka. Where's the solar pump? What solar pump? Oh, this company said they did it. What company? Never heard of them. So there's that bit of interest in my mind, a bit of problem in my mind that number of these companies or not number of these activities are either not doing what they're supposed to do, or they're entrusting people out in the field to do it and they're not doing it, and now it creates a problem. So for me, as someone in the space and someone who understands that this is not free money, there's someone has to pay for this.
Absolutely.
We need to be a bit more diligent in ensuring that people add value to what you're saying. But that's where your point around stewardship is fantastic, because you have 8 years ago, 9 years ago, GVE and Carnegie were brand new companies, maybe 2 or 3 years old. Now they're raising millions of dollars to do projects. So it works. And remember, 7 years ago, or probably 8 years ago, when Yusuf, not Yusuf, yeah, Yusuf Suleiman from Blue Camel,
Yeah.
he voiced several times at different forums, uh, local companies were not getting these grants. And what we've seen now is back then there were probably 10 mini grid companies. Now there's hundreds of mini grid companies.
In fact, I heard NERC in a session today said that there are at least over 300 of them.
Precisely. So the other with that many mini grid companies, it's great, right? But I think it's now we've got to be a way to it has to be a way to put them in buckets because there are mini grid companies that are there, but they're not as efficient as these other ones. So, but I think that's what the grant component does. Part of the work we did with MPSP Power Africa is that we helped one of the outcomes, and they looked at creating mini grid companies and helping them with financial modeling, X, Y, and Z, corporate governance, setting all these things up.
Technical assistance that also engender investment readiness.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So with the absence of my American people in the space, how's the RE space coping? Because the just a point is, like I said, World Bank, AFDB are fantastic, but at the end of their name is the word bank. Money's not free. You got to pay it back. The aids of this world, the fantastic work UKNIAF has done, work MPSP did really good work, and even GIZ. These are grants, but US aid was a massive spender in that space. They've now gone away. Who has taken over their plan?
I would say that the sector in itself was largely impacted, by such a program. And sometimes you ask yourself, while you have the benefits of a very big donor, is that also the best way to go? Because when the tap goes off, what happens?
Yeah.
And I would say that a lot of technical assistance, right, came through such a program like the Nigeria Power Sector Support Program, because of course it's impacted on developers, they impacted on other even practitioners. I remember they were doing trainings on even due diligence, financial models, so these were targeted trainings and technical assistance that really helped improve the sector. Now that they are not longer there, I would say that there's a lot of regrouping happening, a lot of rethinking the process, a lot of thinking about how best. I think even those that are really playing within the space are thinking of how effectively can we still provide relevant TA work and other sort of support to the sector in a much more efficient manner, because the case in this situation, now we don't have all the monies available. So how can what would have done with $1, maybe we'll do X with $1. Now, can we do 5X? And so there's a lot of rethinking and regrouping within the sector. The opportunities, yes, I would say that there are a lot more opportunities that would come, both locally and internationally. Because now companies are able to learn from what was done to now have targeted programs. Now, what we're even seeing is now those who want to launch programs are engaging the industry more directly, right? So because they're engaging them in their design. So it's not a couple of people who just sit down in the boardroom somewhere and just say, hey, we think this is what they need. And boom, a call for application is launched or a program is launched and they just come in country and commission. No, what you now have is a case where we're trying to do this program. Who are the renewable energy association? Who are the associations that exist? Who are the relevant stakeholders? Who is the government players? Who are the big renewable energy companies? Who are those that are doing what? And segment them and begin to engage. This is how we're thinking about this program. And then they get actual feedback that they use to now inform
the
program.
What we know that normally happens is programs won in Brussels and in the UK or in the US, they draft their log frame sitting in a room there, bring it to the minister and say, here's our log frame. I'll bring it to the NERC, REA, here's our log frame, let's move forward. That has proven that it hasn't quite worked because every development agency has what they want to accomplish.
Absolutely.
Given that Nigeria, where we haven't quite coordinated efforts to be able to get things done, what happens is they just show up and they say, this is what we want to do.
Absolutely.
Which could be counterproductive to what you want to do. But because you want to be among them, you agree, and move you towards places that you're not supposed to be.
Not even interested in.
Precisely. So I remember some conversations a few years ago that there were a big push around getting more generation through take or pay. When we're struggling with the Azure.
Even the companies that are generating are still struggling to wheel out all or get all their plants fired up.
And you're saying it's additional generation. So that was interesting. But I said that bit to highlight the work that the program did. When it started, yes, there was a log frame. But once the program started, there was a lot of engagement to really understand where the issues are and are able to align the goal of from the power side, cost-based competitive markets to show what's attainable in the sector. And you look at it and you see things have moved forward. But I also shut it a little bit because once that technical support goes away, who fills the gap?
I think that you're literally spotlighting what it's meant to be. And what is that? It has to be government led. It has to be government led.
How do you coordinate government? If you go now to meet the TCN MD, the NERC chairman, vice chairman, the minister of power, the essay to the president, and ask them, what are the three most important priorities? They'll all be different.
Very true. And now, just like you rightly mentioned, we have all the organizations you mentioned. You ask yourself, why should we meet all four? Who is responsible?
Precisely.
And I want to believe that who's responsible should be the Ministry of Power.
And the Ministry of Power summon or talk to the Ministry of Petroleum and the Ministry of Gas. Are they on the same wavelength?
When we look at government to government engagement, and that's why I say it has to be government led. Ideally, with the government of today, there's an 8-point agenda. And it's clear on what it wants to achieve within the power sector. Now you ask yourself, you cannot do any of these things with one ministry alone. It's just like saying, even with the gas plants, we need gas. And it's within the purview of another ministry. So it's not to say that when I talk about someone taking leadership or responsibility, doesn't mean that you will not talk to relevant sector players. Doesn't mean that you will not even talk to other government entities that are involved. Even the other agencies you mentioned, there must be that agency to agency coordination. There must be that coordination. But why would they speak with different tones? They will speak with different tones, or or talk about if you ask the same question, they give you different responses, because there has to be a high level preceding goal that everybody must align to.
Well, I guess what I'm getting to now, that goal is not apparent. You can say you've got an 8-point agenda, you can say all of that, but the fact is we are still not able to agree on how to move the sector forward. And by that, I mean revenue assurance. That's how, if you look at mini grids, their revenue assurance is almost at 90-something% because they have smart meters in place.
In some cases, 100%. Yeah.
On grid, revenue assurance is terrible. we have we have a metering gap of 6 million, but I'm sure it's more than that, given that enumeration is still not hasn't been quite done.
It worries me when I hear 6 million. Because today, as a country, based on NERC or any of the published reports, I'm not sure we have up to 10% of Nigeria's customer base enumerated.
So let's
through the discos,
let's do the math. If you have 220 million people, so yes, right, that's our number.
Yes.
Divide that by 6 for good measure.
Okay, or 5, we say 5. And what number do we come to? So we come to about 40 million. 40 million. And even as at today,
let's count 20% and say they're off there.
Okay.
You have 20 million left.
So we have 20% of 40 million.
Let's count half of it. Half of it does have power.
Which is hard to discount, but let us say, okay, so even at 20 million people, do we have 20 million people enumerated as of today? Do we have 15 million people? I mean, I'll leave those in charge of these reports to be able to get that information to the public. But I would tell you that if you maintain the real goal should be, and that's why it worries me when we're talking about tariff increments and all of that, because you still leave a huge gap on one, pressure on estimated billing. Two, you also leave the fact that you ask yourself, why is the pressure not to to meter and get to know who are the customers? Because then you leave the burden to a segment of the consumers to pay for the entirety of the country. It doesn't make sense.
What isn't there a conversation that
just as you think about it again, anybody that is considering connections when it comes to off-grid energy is considering those connections through smart meters.
Of course.
Through smart meters. Right? It's myself. With the utility companies, people I believe that should be able to champion such a course. You can go from one location to another and see 3 different or 4 different types of meters. Analog, semi-analog,
ready?
Like almost smart. Just a handful of them, because you also we have some discos that are already deploying smart meters. You know, Echo Disco and a couple others.
Abuja is as well.
Right, Abuja. So you see that some people are really beginning, and guess what? With these smart meters, what it does for you, because that's why I feel it's a no-brainer to get on this wave, because it does for you as an energy provider. One, you can see vending patterns. Two, you can checkmate energy theft, which a lot of discos complain that, oh, we're suffering energy. Hey, we're in a world that is powered by technology and science. So when we and I'm sure we would have smarter infrastructure of meters that would even leverage things like Internet of Things and AI to even make outcomes better. But the technologies we're talking about today are very much available.
Precisely. So, even not to give my people a shout out, but I guess I will. We work very closely with a company called Thematic.
Okay.
IoT firm in the
UK.
Okay. They're in 15 African countries, and they started out as a mini grid provider, then realized that revenue assurance is a challenge. So they went back into the lab, created a product. They now use IoT and AI to leverage.
In fact, they created a product that has gone through multiple levels of iteration.
Precisely. So they're now on the off-grid side in Nigeria as well. They're probably in 6 or 7 distribution companies. And you look at the results of their pilots, one of them especially around, how the village model for discos set up to be able to collect from villages instead of so for my village, especially you don't have a meter, they'll go and say there's 20 houses here, each person pays X or Y. They set that up in Ogidi specifically, and they were able to not only collect 93%. It was a 300 home pilot. 93% of the people vended all the time. There were
There were no theft.
no theft. Theft was detected almost 90% of the time immediately, right? But more importantly, the amount of energy that the disco sent to this community went up from 4 hours to 10.6 hours. Why? Because consumption shot through the roof. And they said, oh, we can make more money and actually move this forward. You would then think that this work has now been presented to you. You would think that you say, where the meters, bring them.
Let's bring them, and a lot of people will jump on it.
But today, that this is still saying, oh, we're waiting for meters from DISREP or from NMMP or from CAPME or from PMI.
To run your business.
To run a
for
business.
Revenue collection for your business.
You drive out of there and you go to this filling station here and they tell you, okay, our pump doesn't work. But we'll sell you for you tell them, sorry, I'll go to the next one.
Where I can monitor what is being served to me.
Precisely. So I think everybody knows these things, but it's quite surprising to hear these. Like, it was a no-brainer when I was okay. This is
if this has been proven, and the truth is, you see, even part of the factors that contributed, nobody wants to be cheated, and that's why you see that there's a lot of challenges when people resistance when people come and say, oh, they just brought a bill for me, estimated bills. It's not that. Some of those bills, if they were reflective of what the people feel that they have consumed, they would pay.
Precisely.
And so part of the issues, and that's why in this community, why the electrons consumption, it moved because people feel like what they are paying for is reflective of their consumption. One, and two, likely you discover that productive activities are increased because when people deploy electricity in a way that people improves how they earn, you will certainly pay.
I remember how the mini grid conversation started. IMAS through GIZ. This is 8-9 years ago. They created mini grids all over the place. But they realized that the model wasn't correct. So the next iterations of mini grids were now focused around productive users.
Absolutely.
And you saw adoption go up. Because power is great, but if it's not around productivity, it won't work.
I'm tempted to share a story.
So there's the issue I have now is I know so much in my head. I'm like, I'm not sure. I don't know these next people. They'll just push this thing out and I'll get into trouble. We don't want that. But I'll share this quick story. 10, 12 years ago, there was an initiative called Operation Light Up Nigeria that the Honorable Minister of Power, Professor Chinedu Nebo, ran when he was minister.
Yeah.
That community, maybe 20 miles outside of Abuja, gave them solar panels, set everything up, fantastic, X, Y, and Z. But because there was people understood light, but they did not understand that they had to now pay for it, the project quickly fizzled out. And people also know that if this thing is actually not cheap, it's expensive. But if you're using it for productive use, you're making money and you're able to afford it. But in that scenario, 2015 happened. A year or so later, that project is done. Same thing with the activity. So there's so many projects that started like this
and just doesn't move on.
So I just feel like my biggest gripe now is all these discos, they know that metering works. But I also know the hard work it is to do this process, to enumerate people, to put meters down, to check, to do all these things, investment and time. And I'm also from a point of view of, it's your business, bro. It's your business. You can't just sit here and say, oh, well, no, that my theory has always been with the original owners is because most of them weren't quite able to run a proper business. Or actually, it's the analogy we have here at the firm that politicians, most of them are not bad people. They just get into an office and they look up and see the level of work they have to do. They just withdraw because hard work is hard work. Not everyone likes hard work. So they get in and then realize that there's too many problems, and they'll just focus on one or two things and move on because addressing the whole piece, like
for example, dropping a transformer in a community, forgetting that the transformer in itself is not a generator. So without relevant connectors, without thinking about the network.
So you have those things happening. So for me, it's like that's how I feel like the disco owners were, because government did not allow due diligence, did not allow all those things to happen pre-sale. Some of the owners got in there and realized, what the hell is this? And there's no way I can run a business based on these models. Because if you remember, due diligence was not allowed for these discos. Yes, they've had time to correct their behavior, but maybe it's just they got and realized it was too much, and now they haven't gotten involved into the nitty-gritty. But more importantly, there's all these people on the field who are still representing the disco, the number two guys, who are there kind of being enforcing meter billing and collecting from and so all these people, their incentives to allow a disco to meter is low, but it's your business. You have to make money. So I think where we're getting to is product like what Abba Power is doing, where they've been able to ring fence generation and they transmit, they distribute, they collect. And from what the trends we're seeing, they're now on the upward trajectory because they've been able to have meters in place by Steamaco, and they've been able to really drive through customers paying for what they use.
There's that customer engagement. You cannot fault it. Anybody that's going to deploy, even in these communities, mini grids, if you don't have an effective customer stakeholder engagement, helping them understand that, hey, it's not free electricity, you have to pay for it. That level of engagement is critical. It makes or breaks. I've heard stories about projects where mini grids were deployed and people said, hey, if it is at this rate, because of those poor stakeholder engagement, with this community, they're like, we're living our lives without your electricity. We'll not die. And interestingly, in Nigeria today, all year round, we don't need, people can live without electricity. And that's why it's important that we don't have this charity mindset towards deploying electricity, because it's a business.
So it must be if I heard you correctly, electricity is not social responsibility.
It shouldn't be seen as a social responsibility. In some people may say, oh, electricity is a human right. People should have electricity, but it is a business. Now, when we have that mindset that it is first a business, now it will drive the way and manner that all critical members of the sector, from government to private sector to consumers, approach it. While you see that during sometimes campaign seasons, some people will hear promises that, oh, we're going to give you electricity and we're going to drop a transformer there. It's a problem for the sector. Such actions, you can do social interventions through providing people with healthcare, subsidized healthcare services, access to education, but not electricity, because electricity in itself is not the end goal. It's a prime mover. It drives the industry, it drives the sector. And so it's important that you have that sort of mindset towards your advocacy. And that's why it's relevant that this whole engagement with people, from different sectors, lengths of the industry, must be done. Because if you don't do it, People, you just come up, and even the discos are not doing enough in getting to engage with
Why
their
this is
customers.
not being held accountable?
Now, about disco accountability, I wouldn't, I, I think that is important that the likes of NERC, who the discos are answerable to, do a bit more work in keeping them accountable, because no one within the sector has that mandate other than NERC, right? You must be able to keep the discos accountable. There were even the session we had earlier today, just talking about virtual power plants, and other industry players were in the room. There was a customer that was complaining that today, if I have a challenge, who do I speak to? And you ask yourself, you have a challenge, who do you speak to? And there is no customer grievance redress mechanism. So you say, write an email. Is it the person that is in the Abababuvu village that does not may not even have access to the internet that is saying to write an email? Because even if they even try to call a helpline, it doesn't work. So rather than thinking of, oh, we're just providing whatever we're providing, we must see it as a marriage where you keep the relationship good because they are fee-paying customers. And you must do everything you can to ensure that they are comfortable. If we do not have that approach and we just keep disco at bay, customer at bay, you will keep on getting customers who want to cut corners, who want to blame the process and not wanting to even engender accountability on their own part. Because even as a customer, you have your responsibilities as well as the discos. So it's a marriage that must happen. Just like how discos, you see that there's this tax master approach. Oh, open your gate. We want to check whether you're bypassing your meter. Not you also open your gate to just come to check how are things going on with your system. Is your lights, is it sparking? Like it sounds unusual, but it's the kind of relationship. Because when people feel that they actually can bank on yourselves, and you're not just trying to give them electrons or even bill for electrons that you did not provide to them, it changes the approach. It changes. So whether you even put smart meters there or not, it may not necessarily count.
My approach is, or my thought process is trust. Politicians are always pushing cheap power as what they'll give to people. There's that point that cheap power is not what people want. People want reliable, affordable,
Yes,
and predictable power.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Notice that affordable is just one of the three pillars. So why haven't politicians been able to say, you know what, guys, I can't give you cheap power, but I will work with X, Y, and Z people to ensure that you have the power at a good rate when you need it, and also when you're able and it's reliable, not just up and down 10 power cuts in 1 hour. I spoke to a senior senator today around the same issue, and he landed at all these things take time. And with the time that's required, the cycle's 4 years. So it's that your point of view with the trust as the issue here.
Trust is one, but also transparency as to this is where we are. These are the plans that we are making. We may not be able to electrify everybody within XXX, but this is our plan. Within this period to this period, these are the projects that we're implementing. And this is what is even costing us. And this is the kind of manpower that we're deploying. Imagine having like a power sector town hall meeting that everybody can tune into, that the minister comes on TV every month or every quarter to say, this is our progress report. We plan that we're going to be able to do this in these locations. This is how far we have done. We're leveraging renewables to meet these targets. This is how well we are doing. These status reports are here and they are verifiable. And if they are not consistent with the happenings on the ground, call us out. You see, there's the power of transparency. Transparency builds trust. When people know that, hey, he's not actually just saying things, but I give a practical example. I remember one time there was a town hall meeting that was put together by, I think, Ministry of Power Participation Fund and NEMSA and a couple of other people listening in. Some of the reports that came was that, hey, some people complained that certain transformers were not functional in their regions. A few months after, the ministry said, hey, we'll take action and we'll ensure that we identify who is responsible and fix it. Guess what? A couple months down the line, it was reported that some people actually testified that those challenges that they mentioned were fixed. What would you tell those people tomorrow about the credibility of the persons that they were speaking to? They automatically trust them. So sometimes you need to create these platforms that engender transparency, that also show people that you are actually here to solve the problem. And if you don't do that, everybody would keep on saying, if I tell them this one now, they will use this information against me. Or if they know this one about me now, they will, and that is not the way to go. That's not the way to go. And so we need to get to a point, especially yes, because certain projects take time. You can take it away. If you're building a hydro plant, for example, or a gas plant, I think the earliest gas plant that we've had in Nigeria that was deployed took about, I think, 2.5 or 3 years. So these things take time. But while we also identify that there are renewable energy solutions that can meet certain demands in the interim, and even in some communities where it doesn't even make sense to extend the grid, a solution and design a business around it. Because keep in mind that the fact that they're deploying electrons to meet current demand doesn't mean that their demands will not also increase. We've seen situations around the country where you deploy mini grid in a community. Maybe at the point of your enumeration, the mini grid, the houses there were about 300 or 400. Come 2 years after, people have built at least an additional 100 households in that community. Why? Because electricity is there. And you see them not just migrating households, migrating their businesses, because they want to be where they can guarantee electricity that can help them meet their business demands. And it's just it. So it's largely it's a mix. Economic, how are people viewing this, and how can they ensure that, how can you on the service side ensure that you are meeting this cost? Because in this case, your customers are always right. And trust me, once you have done some of these things, you can even hold your customers accountable because you have done all that is expected of you. But where can you hold them accountable? Where you're even cutting corners or seen to be cutting corners?
So, but isn't that the same conversation we're having with the regulator and with government? Regulator being government and the distribution companies, because the discos are saying, a la 2015, you reduce the tariffs, and that one action we haven't recovered from it. And by the way, you owe the Gencos and gas supplies 3-4 billion, a trillion.
If it's not more, because I
it's trillion, trillion.
I think it's in the T-ring.
Yeah, you owe them that much money of payments. So it kind of shows that government all around the reform process worked. We got it off government hands, but we haven't quite been able to get the rest of it to happen. So just as a last point here, what would you advise to get this to go through and get us to be a more of an efficient sector? Is it conversations around bringing all the stakeholders in one room? Like you said, that's for the Minister of Power to champion,
to drive.
In years past, there was OVP that was involved. Prior to that, there was PTFP.
That must support the minister, that must support the office. But in terms of ownership and responsibility,
it's the minister.
It's the minister. And so we must now say, how can we support this esteemed office to achieve its goals? What are the things that we need to set in place? Right? And even as a minister, what is that goal?
So it's almost like we're not reading from the same thing.
Yeah, so that we're all reading from the same handbook, whether it is PPI or FGN Power, or it is Presidential Initiative, or it is OVP, or if it is SSA, whoever or whatever, everybody, you can go back and say that this is our goal as a country. And everything we are doing is in line with this. Now, it's a goal. What is the master implementation plan? What can we achieve realistically within the next 0 to 18 months?
So I guess
These things are not, you don't just wish them out.
at all.
Because you also don't have a limitless finance access to, you don't have limited access to finance. So you also have prioritization that must happen. And again, allow me to add, how much do these projects cost? Are we actually spending the amount of money that these projects actually cost, or are they bloated? And if they are, what our procurement process is like? Because if we're spending 3x to achieve X, meanwhile, 3x is supposed to achieve 5x.
And that's the tariff structure. So the cost is
it's not helpful for anybody.
So just to give the Ministry of Power, because you've landed at something that the minister has done this last 18 months. He's done the power policy
to the NIRP.
And now,
absolutely,
next year has been very fortunate. We're going to drive the SIP process for him to ensure that there's an implementation plan for that. The goal and the hope there is everyone will now come together with the various stakeholders and read from the same hymn book. Absolutely. If not, we'll get to a place where you have ministry doing transformative projects, REA, the same thing, DISCOs, NIPP, NDPHC, and Siemens.
Yes, the Presidential Power Initiative, FDM Power.
You have all these people doing projects, and they're not all coordinated to sit in one place and say, this is how we're going to do it going forward. David, we brought you in to talk about grants and mini grids. Well, we spent the better half of this conversation talking about the grid because of one point of view, that at the end of the day, mini grids are just part of the bigger solution. Of course. And the grid, for us to grow as a country, you've got to get the grid working. And that's why we talked about it for the last 35 or 40 minutes.
In fact, you just ended it on the best note possible. While we work on mini grids, we must also begin to see when we already seen pilots, interconnected mini grids. The good thing is now developers are and discos are not shaking hands. Discos are now saying, "Hey, we have these sites. During this, you can consider these sites, and we've even done the enumeration, and we're willing to partner with you to develop solutions in this."
And that's a fantastic thing about this new dares that they're talking through. They're actually going through a very systematic process to interconnect with distribution companies. So the REA leadership with ABBA and their leadership with NEP have done a fantastic job to be able to because mini grid project in a random village in Anambra State is great, but if you interconnect plaza and industry, you do an industrial cluster and actually make it more productive, create jobs, and we actually move this thing forward. Because if not,
and then we can now even begin to take advantage of certain things like carbon credits, because
I want to speak English.
But these are also opportunities. It's also been proven that carbon credits can reduce project costs
of course,
by up to 10% by voluntary carbon market. So there are also opportunities here as well. So it's not a case of we're just saying renewable energy, try to do clean energy, but it also has its own economic value that it contributes in the overall scheme of things.
David, thank you so much. I knew that this would be an interesting conversation, and I cannot wait to have you back on the program. Thank you.
Absolutely a pleasure. Thank you so much again for having me.
Please hate us. Please. This podcast is brought to you by Next Year Capital, committed to driving conversations that shape Africa's energy future. Please subscribe share, and stay tuned. Until next time, I am Emeka Okpukpara Jr., and this has been Connecting the Dots.